Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, a live discussion on House of the Dragon as Season 2, Episode 1, A Son for a Son. I'm here joined by probably the usual gang. Great to have here. First, Darrin from D's Reviews. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Really excited to be here with you and Alyssa, talking a little bit more of Westeros conversations. It's been a while, so I'm stoked to jump into it tonight.
And of course, my sister Alyssa. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here, getting back into Westeros. You know, HBO was doing that whole marketing campaign of what do you choose, Team Green, Team Black. I'm curious if anyone who identified with Team Black previously declared for Team Black has converted after this episode.
Oh, interesting. I was actually thinking, like, who in their right mind would support Team Green? Like, even after this episode.
I don't know. They're like, I guess, putting big banners in New York City and stuff. And like,
I've seen. Are they like the Team Green? Yeah, I think.
Apparently, there's one of the Empire State Buildings. It's like Team
Green. Look, I think both sides is working really hard to show how much they suck. Yeah. So, it's like it's a battle to the bottom, folks. The House of the Dragon.
I feel like I was more, and I think I talked about this last 2 years ago, last season, is that I'm more inclined to follow Team Black because they're more progressive, and where Team Green is more traditional and more like religious, and so that makes me like sort of.
Sure. No, I mean, yeah, I'm totally with it. I would like to be more Team Black, but again, it's kind of like we got to go, well, you can't like us too much.
Yeah.
Hold on one moment. Damon? Yeah.
Well, this is the Game of Thrones universe, so there are no straight up heroes.
That is very true.
All right. So, what did we think of the episode overall? Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
I loved it. I thought it was a really great first episode, like a good way to hook us back into the world of Westeros and get us back into these characters. There were a lot of, character scenes. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of like action. We're not going to get into the whole big dragon battles just yet, as I anticipate that we may get later in the season. There's a lot of dialogue, but I thought it was a good way to kind of get our feet wet, get us back into it. And some great dialogue scenes, and most of which weren't in the book. So here's the thing: like, I hate to be one of those book people, but it's hard for me to view this as anything other than an adaptation and judge it by how good of an adaptation it is. And I thought this episode was an amazing adaptation of the source material, just as continuing what they did in season 1. I thought that of season 1 too, because I'm sure we've talked about this before, but the Fire and Blood book is written like a history book. It's like, well, this event happened, and then this event happened, and then this event happened, and sometimes it can be kind of dry. And I love the way the show really brings these characters to life in a way that they weren't in the books. Like, adds nuance to them, adds nuance to the story that wasn't in the book. One of the characters that I really loved what they did within this episode was Aegon, making him more interesting by far than he was in the book. And and I'm sure we'll get into the infamous blood and cheese scene at the end. But I know that I have seen, this is very predictable. Anytime any big scene from any kind of book of source material gets adapted to the screen and they change anything, you're going to always see the people who are like, oh, they ruined it. Oh, they didn't follow it word for word exactly what happened in the book. But I actually thought it was a really smart adaptation. I thought what they did was really good. And again, they're adding nuance, not only to this scene, but to the other sort of big catalytic scene at the end of the previous season, which is when Aegon, or Aemon rather, kind of accidentally kills Luke, because both of these events, I think, in the books were pretty straightforward. Like, the people did what they set out to do, and here in the in the show, it's like the results of what happens aren't necessarily what was intended. Like you can see in Aemon didn't actually, he was just kind of fucking with Luke and didn't really mean to kill him at the end of the last season. But he also put himself in that position of, fucking with Luke with a dragon, shit's gonna happen. And here it wasn't like Damon, and certainly not Rhaenyra, intended for a small child to be murdered, but you kind of also put yourself in that position for something like that to happen. And I just find that so much more interesting than just in the book. The way it's presented is just like, well, they just went and did this bad thing, and that's what happened. So just a lot more nuance that the show is able to add that I just really enjoy. And I just thought it was really exemplified in this episode. So yeah, I do expect it to get a little, pick up the pace, get a little more exciting. But as for a first episode to get us back into the world, and then to end on that just really Game of Thronesy moment, I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before that I think this is I don't know if I'm ready to say that it's better than Game of Thrones because I have recency biased, and also that show had a terrible ending. But what I will say is I think they're in a better position adapting, because the fact that it is written like a history book leaves a lot more room for the writers of the show to negotiate and navigate, and they're not tied to any specific. And you will have occasionally, like you mentioned, Alyssa, people comparing it to the books, like the Blood and Cheese thing, being like, oh, they didn't follow it to the letter. But you have less of that in this case than you would with a book like Game of Thrones, because a lot is open to interpretation. In fact, I love how it is written by a history book by a maester or whatever who's taking it from 3 different sources. So he says, well, this person says this and that person says that. And so you have a lot of different avenues for adaptation that gives you a lot more options to go through. And sometimes something that's different from the book might not necessarily be a change. It's because they're writing it from a historical perspective. So this is the commoner's perception of what happened back then. And so what the commoners know, or what's written in history books, might not be what actually occurred. And so that leaves, for example, as you mentioned, characters like Rhaenyra, or pretty much all the characters, particularly Rhaenyra and Alicent, come off as like more like rigid and mean and cruel and like, fuck everyone, I want the throne, which is probably what a historical account thought. Maybe that's what the common people thought of them, but in real life, they were probably a bit more dynamic. And so I love adding the nuance, like you said, the Aegon they did in this episode, adding the nuance to the characters and stuff. So yeah, I agree. I think this is. I actually think, I'm not ready to say it's better than Game of Thrones, but I think it's a better adaptation, personally. But anyway, Darrin,
it's also, I mean, just
go ahead. Yeah.
Compared to Game of Thrones, a little probably easier to adapt because there's a lot less meat on the bone there. But
yes, it's more focused. I think that's why some people like Game of Thrones better because of that, because it had more going. But I think there's benefits to being a more focused story.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like, I mean, you can play with some interesting stuff within that as well, because if you have basically addressed an unreliable narrator who can be either unreliable or biased, you could even tell the story from one point of view, but understand that it could be read for another point of view. And that's the point of view that's in the book for the people that want to get all stickly, or like you said, you could play with it. And and that could be done to either, beneficial or detrimental effect, depending on how you do that adaptation. And I think I watched the last episode of last season just before we watched this one. I watched it on Saturday and then watched the premiere on Sunday, just to kind of catch up. I pretty much remembered most of the things, but get back into that feel. And it really reminded me of the problems that I had with season 1. I felt the pacing was a little off. The split in the middle of the season really changed perspectives on characters and really kind of, I thought was stutterish in its storytelling, and I didn't think they did the best job.
Mm.
From the damn opening, love the new opening, by the way. Instead of doing the blood things that we're doing a tapestry that's being told, I'm like, yes, this more is interesting. It's more similar to the map where it's something that grows. Plus, you could focus on who we're telling the story of this time, or maybe it will change as the tapestry goes in the season and episodes. I thought it was much more of a storytelling mechanic versus just the ooh, cool blood dripping down, because I could never recognize anybody's sigils or who was doing or what. It was all over. They gave up on gravity halfway through all of that. They were just, we're just doing cool stuff. This, I thought, really, I just embraced it immediately. I loved hearing the Game of Thrones music again. I loved seeing this new intro. It got me excited. And certainly through that whole first opening bit in Winterfell, I was like, now I feel this again. Now I feel like it's Game of Thrones. I think whether it's good or bad or better than worse, it's better to me than season 1, certainly. And in line, it felt like Game of Thrones. It felt like that type of story. It felt there was a weight to it that just pulled me forward, I think, into this episode. So yeah, I think they did an amazing job. It does unfortunately carry that weight of the season opener, where you have to kind of set everybody up and start the balls rolling that you're going to be dealing with this season and do all those bits. And I only say that because I remember, again, after watching the last one, like all of last season felt like setup, especially the second half, and you're waiting for the old man to die, and then you're waiting for the things to happen, and then you're waiting for the declare war, and then the message comes that Luke's got killed, and she just turns around, and you're like, yeah, and then it ends. And so it kind of like, man, I was watching you just go start the war and just jump right into it, but you can't. You gotta set things up, and I certainly appreciate, and I think this is probably why we maybe like Team Black a little bit more on some points, is Rhaenyra is not driving headlong into war like everybody else is. And I love the fact that we hit on it. She's the one that's actually trying to weigh, do we have to do this? Is there a way to avoid some things? We see the price that's going to happen. And I really kind of felt all of that in with this episode. So while there was a certain level of frustration just because I wanted it to start going, it's episode 1. We got to set the pieces up. And I think for what they did really well. I appreciate, even like we got to do another funeral scene now and we got to have the remorseful moments. Yes, they had to do it, but I appreciate they didn't dwell on it too long. They really kind of kept the story going. So I really enjoyed the pacing and the fact that this was kind of a setup episode. I think they did it cleanly. They did it well. I was really engaged with what each side was doing and planning. I hated the people that we should hate, and was hoping for the best from the people that maybe could be redeemed. And then they decide to end it that way. And look, Aemon's got his issues, but I don't believe that he tried to kill Luke there. They both thought they had more control over their dragons than they did. It's the dragons that really ended up going after each other, I think, more than anything else there. But that was not the choice to do to follow it up with this one. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. We'll talk about it more when it comes.
Yeah, so as I said about this episode in my review, is that it is a setup episode. It reminded me a lot. It reminded me a lot more of a Game of Thrones episode than I think a lot of episodes in season 1 did, because it reminded me of a season premiere, because it followed the format almost exactly where they would go to the different various characters, have them have these dialogue scenes and set it up. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing though, like, because that, I think in some ways that really works, and you need to have an episode at the start of the season to establish you into the world instead of just jumping headlong into just plot with no characterization. Sorry. And and so that's why the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones worked. But anyway, and so but I think that it does give me, as I'm watching it, make me feel like it's a bit slow paced, and does give me that angsty feeling of come on, get on with it. But at the same time, I know I'm going to appreciate all of this setup when we come later into the season, once we actually get into the heavy stuff. And of course, it had that powerful ending. Which is also, I think, typical of these Game of Thrones season premiere. They would always have slow-based dialogue scenes, but end with something like really powerful.
I don't think there's ever been a season premiere that ended with like that kind of thing, though.
Not that powerful, no.
It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how that plays off.
All right, so well, Darrin, you already brought up what I first wanted to start talk about, and that is the new intro with the tapestry. I was also very impressed by that. I had to watch like these little YouTube videos afterwards that described exactly what was going on, because I couldn't really follow it that quickly. But it was much better than the stupid blood thing. I agree. I never liked the blood thing, and that I needed to watch videos to be like, oh, that's the symbol for this person and that person. I'm like, oh, like I can't get, even after being told that, I can't get any of that from watching that intro. And so I was actually surprised they changed it up. I'm glad they didn't. And I've heard, of course, theories that they're going to start adding more events to it, to the intro. Like the intro might change up like the Game of Thrones intro used to. But anyway, Alyssa, do you have any thoughts on the new intro?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right on board with you guys. I really appreciated this new intro. The old one, like I didn't even try to follow it. Like I just kind of, my eyes glazed over, and like I listened to the theme song. I always like the theme song. Like, oh cool, it's Game of Thrones, it's got that theme song. But I didn't really pay any attention to the blood thing. Like that was hard to follow. I didn't care about it. This is much more interesting, and I did assume that they would continually change it up, and I'm looking forward to watching how they alter it with each episode. So I'm interested in the intro again, as I was in the original Game of Thrones, because you could kind of see where the story was going to be in that episode, because they would change up like which part of the map. I think they always went to Winterfell on the Wall, no matter what. But otherwise, they would change things up, and you can kind of see where the story was going on that episode by watching the intro. And I think hopefully they've maybe brought that back a little bit. So I really, really do like that. And I actually heard someone compare to the Wheel of Time intro, and I was like, oh yeah, it kind of is, except I don't know I couldn't remember what the Wheel of Time theme song sounds like. So it's got the Game of Thrones theme song, so it's better.
I can think of the Wheel of Time song. I can't think of what the intro.
Yeah, and it's similar, but they don't change it up every time.
Yeah,
pretty like it's a tapestry that they're weaving.
Oh, okay, right.
But I think this one is a lot better.
Anything to add, Darrin?
No, I think that's it. I'm glad they liked it again. I think it's a better choice. And again, the map is a storytelling. You know where you're going. You see the towns go up. You're intrigued with the way little building styles do. It pulls you in.
I remember.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I remember like geeking out like at the start of season 5, like, oh, Dorne's on the map. Like I already knew they were going to Dorne, but I was like, oh my god, we're in Dorne now. Oh my god, like
yeah, and it was exciting to see the new places, and you could see where you're going to be that episode and what was going to be happening. And we just didn't have that. It was just kind of like a cool CG intro for the last. This is a tapestry, is like a map. It tells a story, and the fact that this is telling a story, it's just a much smarter choice to do. And I think now I'm going to be paying attention. What are they building? What are they weaving? Is it the same story? Has anything changed? Now I'm going to be paying attention to it. And I think that's what you're going to want when you want to keep doing this kind of high quality intro.
The other thing I heard someone mention on a podcast I listened to, I didn't actually catch this, but now that they mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, that probably is true. That they, in order to make the theme song fit into last year's intro, they have to cut it at a certain point.
No,
so
I didn't know this.
They're abrupt, and now they're back to the full theme song, which I didn't actually notice. But now that they brought it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I think that is true.
I think there's actual 2 big cuts in the midst of it. I think it's a little bit more, but yeah, and they've had to do it because I think they made a couple of changes, but there's just a switch like in the middle that's almost an abrupt like, huh? Because especially when you know the song so well, you're doing it in your head and you're kind of like, oh wait, did we jump forward there or what? So leave the whole song. Do your thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I still have of the mind that they should have just came up with a new theme song. And they're kind of trying to leech off of Game of Thrones too much.
I love that theme song so much that it just gets me pumped. It gets me pumped. So I'm a fan of keeping the theme song, but I like this year's intro better.
But speaking of music, I wanted to start with the opening scene in Winterfell because we got the old Stark music. That was very nostalgic. Open up with the Stark music. For some reason, I always think of Catelyn Stark for that music specifically, but they use it for all the Starks.
Yeah.
And, but I don't know why I associate that. But it was. I guess there wasn't much going on in this scene. We had like this whole monologue with Cregan Stark, and pretty much saying anyone who's seen Game of Thrones pretty much knows all this about the Wall and how the North is devoted to it. And then you get the scene where Jace was, and they were kind of hitting it off. It was good seeing Cregan and Jace kind of hit it off a bit, but Jace is very dismissive about, what do you need to worry about, a bunch of wildlings or weather, and he's like, it's not just that, and brings up the fact that the dragons are too scared to go beyond the Wall, and how there's you think our ancestors built that giant fucking wall just for weather. And so this is interesting. I haven't gone back and reread the book yet. I was planning to the House of the was it Fire and Blood, but I haven't done it yet, and I couldn't remember if this was different in the book where Cregan Stark, because here Cregan's like, I can only spare you the gray men because I need to have everyone here manning the wall. Did that happen in the book? Do you remember?
I just read it and I still don't remember. I was like, it'd be, it might have at first. I don't recall. I think actually, you know what it is in the book? It's not the Greybeards. It's like these other northern houses that are a little further south, but a little closer, joined first.
Oh, okay. Is that
so? And it's like a bunch of these houses that I hadn't heard of.
Right.
But I don't remember if they did the thing about the Greybeards in the book. But I do remember that it's like at the beginning of the war, it's just like a bunch of these like other northern houses that are like a little closer to the south.
And I've heard some people complain about the actor's accent who played Cregan Stark, and I was like, yeah, it's fine. I didn't explain. Yeah, I didn't have any problems with his accent.
I thought that this was a really smart choice to begin the episode this way, because you are trying to bring people back into this world of Westeros, and what is the best way you could possibly do it? But go back to the Starks and
big old bowl of member berries.
Yeah, but it's doing member berries, but it's also like it's something. This is a different era of the Starks, and I find it interesting that Cregan Stark is talking. He's implying that he knows about the White Walkers. In Game of Thrones, they didn't the White Walkers were this myth. They didn't believe anybody when they saw them. So somewhere in the 180 years, something gets lost.
to me, that was the kind of exciting thing about it, because it feels like that back in the day when remembering. And again, I love that line. Do you think we would have built a 700-foot wall for weather?
Yeah.
But and his seriousness is, I got to keep the low ones. But hey, we got, we got some old people that have seen too many winters. They can go down your help. They're seasoned. I mean, I kind of like that, because it shows that at this stage in time, the threat is still real. And if I remember when we got to Game of Thrones, the threat was legendary. Oh, it's this thing. This feels like, because it's a little closer in time, it's like it's a little realer in their hearts. And I love that difference.
Well, it's interesting though, because like with the White Walkers are from what, thousands of years ago? And so there's only 180. So they went thousands and thousands of years, like remembering it. Then all of a sudden, like up to this 180-year period, they forget somehow. So like makes me wonder, like, what happened in that.
It was a summer of never to forget.
Yeah, I've heard people complain about that too, because when Game of Thrones started, no one takes White Walkers seriously. They're like, oh, that's just child stories and legends. And here, Craig and Stark is taking it totally seriously. So
yeah, I'm not complaining about it. I'm just curious how those shift happened in that time.
Well, there's other people who've complained about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really agree with that. I'm fine.
And Alex is saying that they do send the graybeards in the book.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, there you go. But yeah, I remember I recently rewatched the live discussion me, you, Alyssa, and Don did right after season 1 ended, where we're predicting season 2 and season 3 and season 4 based off the books. And I got a prediction wrong, because I said that they were going to show Jace going to the Eyrie first and talking to Lady Jane, but you and Don were it's like, no way, they're going to open the show in Winterfell. They have to. And they're like, you were totally right. They had to open the show in Winterfell.
I don't actually remember saying that, but and I believe that I would, because I thought it made such perfect sense, such a perfect way to open the show. Like, you have to open it in Winterfell. So yeah, it sounds like something I would say because I thought it was the perfect way to do it.
Oh yeah, Winterfell, the wall. It was definitely the right choice. Actually, I do have a question for ye history knowledgers. Now, I remember in Game of Thrones, that was the end of an extremely long summer that I guess went decades or something like that. Do we know? Is this like an onset of winter? Is this also all in the midst of summer? These periods that the War of Dragon is. It just felt like he was feeling like winter was a little more approaching, as opposed to just the stark saying of winter is coming.
Yeah, I believe, if I remember from the books, I believe it takes place in like autumn, and like towards the end of the story. Yeah, actually, I was just reading, because the book goes past where the show's going to go, and I remember past it is winter, so I think this is autumn. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a reason why he might feel like, hey, we really got to get ready for time. And what he'd even say is like, this is just a light summer dusting, real winter storm. You forget what warmth feels like.
Yeah. But I also want to say, I thought that was a little much when Jace didn't know what snow was. What is this white stuff fooling him? I'm like, come on.
Oh, he did that? I didn't.
Yeah, I missed that totally. You're right. That is dumb.
The line that you just said was right after he said that.
Oh, okay.
What is this white stuff? And he's like, oh, this is but a light summer dusting, my friend.
Oh, right.
I'm like, okay, come on. He's been in the north long enough now where he probably had experienced snow before. So I don't know. Anyways,
it's white and it's cold and it's everywhere. Oh my god.
I am a little bit disappointed. Like, I totally agree why they need to open Winterfell, but I'm a little bit disappointed we didn't see the area at all. That he just mentioned it briefly.
We will. I'm pretty sure we will. In fact, I know from the trailers, like we definitely see scenes that are in the Vale. So we will probably see a glimpse of Lady Jane, see those characters a little bit. I don't think we needed to see him treat with everybody. Like, I just think that would have been.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, there was that. I didn't think they were going to do the bullshit in the book where Lady Jane said, "You have to please me, make me climax with your mouth in order for me to join an alliance."
That's for a future episode now. So save that moment. You don't want to be too Game of Thrones with your opening episode. Remind them of the Winterfell and the wall. Not so much of all the naked butts. And well, I guess there was.
We did a little bit of that, though.
I was going to say,
yeah.
Whether there was. Well, they didn't want to take away from Allison's moments, you know.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but that is definitely something invented for the show. But
so, just real quick, sticking with the books, Alyssa, are you letting go of your theory that Sarah Snow is going to be in the show?
Yeah, I mean, I even said in my prediction video that was like a very unlikely thing to happen, and it's one of the things somebody came, "Oh, I can't believe you said Sarah Snow." I even said in my video, like, I think it's probably not going to happen. I just think it was a fun prediction to make.
Sure.
I thought it was like a very, very low chance of it happening to begin with. And now I think that the ship has sailed. But what we're talking about is in the book, they have these 3 different narrators, and one of them is this court jester dwarf named Mushroom, and he always comes up with the most like raunchiest.
Yeah, that thing about climaxing with the mouth, that was Mushroom.
That was Mushroom, yeah. And then so he said that Jace had sex with Kragen's bastard sister, Sarah Snow, and then Kragen was a little upset by it. He's like, "Oh, we'll get married." And even though like he's already betrothed to somebody, he got secretly married to Sarah Snow. But then in the book, the maester who's writing it saying, "I don't think that's what happened. Like, that's very unlikely." And I didn't really think they would do that in the book either, or in the show either. But I just thought it was a fun prediction. Like, that would be fun if they did do that. I think totally unlike HBO to add in a sex scene.
True. But yeah, I do think that if that would have happened, it would have been in this episode.
Yeah, so. No. I never really believed that was going to
Right.
happen.
Right. Okay, so I don't know if anyone else had anything else to say on Winterfell before we move on.
Nope.
Okay, so let's go back to Dragonstone, where we get Rhaenys returning from patrolling the seas with her dragon, and Daemon approaches her and is kind of being a bit of a dick, being a bit war hungry, saying that, "Oh yeah, we're going to King's Landing now. You take your dragon, I'll take my dragon. We're going to kill, was it Vagar? I believe that big ass dragon is."
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, I'm tired. My dragon's tired. I need to rest." And Daemon keeps pushing it and saying, eventually he says, "I command you," and she's just like, "Would if you were king," and just walks away. So I fucking love, but exactly, Rhaenys is just awesome. But also in that, what I think was interesting, because this was a change from the book in season 1 that was referenced again here, that is a different dynamic than the book, is because in the books, Rhaenys never popped up with her dragon and had the chance to like kill the entire Green family. Like, that never happened in the book. So I'm glad they referenced it again here. And I think Daemon kind of got a point. It was like, Luke would still be alive. All this would be over if you had just wiped out their whole line right then and there. And she didn't really have anything to say about that. But because I think he actually had a good point. But he was being stupid about wanting to just charge and go to King's Landing with the dragon. And it shows how things were kind of falling apart too when Rhaenyra wasn't there. But I do like how Rhaenys defended Rhaenyra, saying that, understand what it's like to grieve the death of a son, and saying that she needs time to deal with it. But anyway, Darren, we'll start with you on this one.
Rhaenys is awesome. And I think that they're probably setting up that similarity to Rhaenys and Rhaenyra the kind of approval, and we got a lot of that into last season, especially toward the end. It's kind of like, the older matronly lady, like, okay, you're learning how this is going to go, because of course she should have originally been queen ages ago, but also missed that moment. So I think they're doing a thing where they're trying to show the women on this side of the family trying not to be as bloodthirsty as the men. I think especially with Damon, you have that big difference. She's hesitant to just wipe out that line. And she does have a point. It wasn't her fight to start. It wasn't her war to start. She's not really involved. She's pulled into it, but she's not the center of that particular battle. But you're also right. I think Damon had an excellent point. It's like, yeah, but if you did, then the kid would have still be alive, and what you gonna do? But I think we're seeing an interesting dichotomy is who's rushing forward and who's pausing. Again, that's the bit that we get with Rhaenyra later on. She's trying to wait to weigh things to see what the right move is, and I think they're trying to set that particular dynamic right here, while underlying the fact that Rhaenys could give a fuck what Daemon thinks. And I love that she's just underscores her position, like, yeah, you're not in charge. You want to be in charge, but you're not, and I'm not going to bow to you because I know it. And I love that. So yeah, I think again we have that dynamic through this episode, showing the women being a little more, at least on this side of the pond, being a little more cautionary and jumping into things, where the men obviously willing to just charge forward with, any bit of revenge will do. The right revenge, the wrong revenge, near revenge, just some sort of revenge, and we're good to go. Alyssa?
Yeah, that's a theme throughout this whole show, that the women are showing caution and the men want to rush into it on both sides. Remember, Alicent is the one who convinced Aegon last season to treat with Rhaenyra rather than doing what Otto wanted to do, which is go and kill her immediately. And Alicent in this episode is still on the side of restraint. Let's not rush into war. We'll see how she feels after what happened at the end of this episode. But up until this point, and it's Aemond and Aegon who are like, "No, we're gonna rush into war," and Kristen Cole are like, "We're gonna rush into war. Let's start going." And even Otto was like making passive aggressive comments about Alicent and how it's her fault, in the meeting. And so it's on both sides. You're really seeing it on both sides, that the women are trying to be a little more cautious about going into war. Let's think about this a little bit more, whereas the men generally want to rush into it. And in particular, the show really seems to be setting up the parallels between Aemond and Daemon. They seem to be two sides of the same coin on each side of it, of the greens and the blacks. But as for this particular scene, this is one of the scenes that I mentioned that completely not in the book at all, that I really enjoyed. I enjoy these interactions. These are two characters that, they don't really interact in the book, and seeing the dynamic between the two of them, Rhaenys being really more understanding of Rhaenyra's position, having been a grieving mother herself recently, twice, really. She doesn't even mention Laenor. So really having a lot of empathy for that position. Also, remember last season, when Corlys was kind of hesitant to join Team Black, Rhaenys pointed out that, well, Rhaenyra is the one in that room who's showing the most restraint. So you could tell she really respected that in general. So to see these two point of views colliding, and Demon also making a good point about, like, well, you could have killed everybody and this never would have happened. I love Rhaenys' response at the end. Rhaenys is so badass. Where he's like, "I command you," and she's like, "Would that you were king," and just walks away. And that's so good. I really love this scene. And again, I'm completely show original thing that's not in the book at all. That it's really one of those things that like adds a lot of dimension to these characters that I really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so want to move on to another scene that we get with Corlys getting the fleet ready and getting his ship that was apparently nearly destroyed in the Stepstones. Apparently, he's already got a fleet out there having a stranglehold, doing a blockade in King's Landing because that's referenced a lot, and we see some of the consequences and some of the fear of what that's going to cause in King's Landing when we go there. But yeah, we meet a new character, and I think you don't need to have read the books to realize that they're not introducing this character for no reason if we're never going to see him again. There is another character that I recognize from the books that is introduced later in the episode, but that one I don't think is as obvious, so I'm not going to mention that. But this one I think is pretty obvious. They're introducing this new character, Alan, who had saved Corlys's life during the Stepstones and that whole event where he nearly died and his brother tried to steal his inheritance from him. But anyway, yeah, so, and it's interesting getting that his reaction about how he made the blade for Jace and how like bittersweet that is for Corlys, that he is really was really was looking forward to Jace being his heir and was really all for that. Luke, yes, I'm sorry. I always get two next up. Yeah, Luke, the one who died. Luke, who was his heir. He was really invested in that, even though technically they're not related. He knows that they're bastard, but he doesn't care because all he cares about is names. But it shows like the bitterness of that moment. But I think, as I said, I think it's setting up this character to be important. What I thought was interesting, though, is that he mentioned that Alan, the new character, mentioned that he has a brother. Because I had heard some theories, because he did have a brother in the book, I heard some theories that they would combine the two characters for the show, but apparently not, bringing both the characters in. But anyway, yeah, listen.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too into the weeds of the book, but they appear to be switching their ages. Because Alan's the younger brother in the book, and they appear to be making him the older brother. I have no idea why they're doing that, but just confuse everybody.
Well, weren't they both around like Luke and Jace's age?
Yeah, and they were 16 and 15 years old, respectively, in the book. This dude is not 16.
No.
This is the guy from Raised by Wolves.
Yes,
I recognize him until someone pointed that out. I was like, oh yeah, it is that guy. But like he's so weird and different in Raised by Wolves. He's that weird android dude in Raised by Wolves. Such a bizarre character and such a bizarre show. I don't know, Darren, if you ever caught Raised by Wolves.
Oh yeah.
But like such a like that he's so far out of context in this that I literally did not recognize him. He was in all the trailers and everything and promo material, and I did not recognize him until someone said, oh, it was that guy from Raised by Wolves. And then I went back and watched that scene again. I was like, it's totally the guy from Raised by Wolves. But there's really not much to say about it at this point. I think we got to save the conversation for this character. As you said, Mark, I mean, you don't have to be a book reader to be able to read the signs that, yes, this character is going to be in the show. So I think we can get more into this character as they kind of reveal more about him and who he is, and like as we see what role he has to play in the story and those sorts of things. So this is one of those examples of it's a first episode. We're laying the groundwork. We're setting things up. We're like, oh, here's this new character, and it's funny. I hear people talk about how his name is Alan, and they're like, well, we have Jaehaerys and Jacaerys and Rhaegar and all this, and then Alan. But it's in Westeros, so he of course spells his name with a Y. It's Alyn.
So people used to say the same shit about Kevin Lannister. It's like Kevin.
Yeah, but it's like, come on, isn't it?
Yeah, spelled differently.
Like you have to spell it weird in Westeros. It can't just be like, you're not gonna, except for I guess
Bob Lannister.
they did have Jon Snow. Like,
Yeah, well, yeah.
I just want to know if his brother's name is Elin. Alan and Elin, because we got Eric and Eric. Eric and Eric.
His name is Adam with like 2 D's and 2 A's.
Yeah, so it's still
Alan and Adam? Okay.
Adam
Yeah.
and
All right.
Yeah.
Somebody was having fun with the phone book after. What the guy should I name this? Alan. Oh, that's with a Y. Okay.
That's what fun if they had with naming the Tullys, though. I don't know if you caught the name of the. We haven't met the Tullys yet, but their name like Grover and Kermit. And
yes,
what's the other one?
Not noticed that.
Yeah, no, George R. R. Martin did that intentionally. Like he did all the Muppets for the Tullys and.
But see, I could go with that. At least you're just like, okay, all right, we see where you're going through.
I heard that it was the other 2 people who wrote The World of Ice and Fire with him who named.
Oh, I thought it was George R. R. Martin himself.
Oh, I could be wrong. That's what I heard.
That's what I had always heard, but who knows?
Yeah. Anyway, Darrin.
We got a bunch of mushrooms and just went to town, and we got this whole Muppets fixation one night when we were in chapter 22, and it just happened. But yeah, no, I don't really have a whole lot to tell. As I said, you're definitely setting stuff, and I did appreciate. In fact, when he pulled out the sword, I was like, "Oh, is that going to be for Luke?" Because it would seem like the only reason why you would bring that up at the moment is in order to get that. Remorseful kind of acceptance, which I think they did great. And I think it underlines Corliss's character, both in his, bereavement of this heir that, like you said, he knows that it's not really related to him, but its name and its connection. And he and his daughter seem to like each other. And so he's being the accepted father in this, while also being someone who is like recognizes someone's deeds to him. It wasn't just like, thank you. It's like, hey, I owe you one. And you're only saying that because, that's going to come up down the road.
Yeah. And Alan, I think they did a good job of introducing him. Someone who's very humble and it's just like, oh, I was just doing my duty. And,
exactly. And, hey, as we know historically, big Pirates fan, Pirates all the way. So you get a guy getting on a ship and he's going to go and do his thing. I'm all for that life. So I love the character, and you definitely see Corlys as a guy that's just like, yeah, he's the Lord of Driftwood, but he'd rather be out on his boat.
Yeah,
just doing his thing, and that's what he's waiting for. It's like, I just can't wait to heal. I gotta get on the boat. How long until we gotta time this so we're all ready to go? But no, I think that it was a nice scene. I liked him reestablishing Corlys's character that way and setting up this groundwork between people that, again, I'm automatically appreciating. Yes, I want to see more of this story.
Cool. So we'll go over to King's Landing, and something really interesting I want to talk about is that we get a little, sexy scene going between Kristen Cole and Alicent Hightower. And as far as I remember, this was a change from the book.
100%.
100%.
Absolutely not ever mentioned at all, even by Mushroom. Like, this is completely 100% show invented.
And I feel like they were kind of maybe hinting at this in season 1, but it wasn't, didn't actually get confirmation until this episode. And this really changes thing. I've heard some people who not upset at like the show or the writing, but more upset at like in universe at Alicent saying that she's a huge hypocrite because what she did in season 1 with, shaming Rhaenyra for, oh my God, you lost your maidenhead and all this bullshit. And Kristen Cole himself is kind of a hypocrite because he the reason why he hates Rhaenyra now is because she would refuse to get married to him, refuse to run off with him, and now he's breaking his vows willy nilly with Alicent. So they're both kind of giant hypocrites now. It's really changed, and plus it had this dynamic where Alicent was very sort of pure and proper and pious, and which is part of the reason why she hated Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra would just go off and sleep with whoever she wanted and flaunt her bastards or whatever in front of everyone else, and how she had to stay married to the crypt keeper, and it wasn't a very lovely existence for her. But now she's kind of, maybe she's like said after what happened, is like kind of like a fuck it, and and kind of using Rhaenyra as a kind of guideline to be like, well, fuck it, she's gonna do this shit, I'll do it too.
Wait, Mark, hold on. Are you saying a devout religious person is being a hypocrite? I never.
I know, unthinkable.
No,
look, she's
religious people who aren't hypocrites. I'm not saying all devout religious people are hypocrites, just to be clear. But it's a very common thing.
Look, I mean, she's single. She's a widow, and technically, as long as he doesn't father any children, I guess. I don't know the particulars of that. No, fuck this guy, man. You thought that he was going to be cool when they first introduced him, and then he became a big old dickweed. And look at him in season 2. He's just munching down on the queen there. Look, man, you can have whatever relationships you want. But I don't like the guy. I think they're trying to underline not to like the guy. And I agree with them. I don't like the guy. And yes, it totally makes Alicent completely hypocritical looking because, yeah, she is trying to be all righteous in this particular sense. And I mean, the standard, this will never happen again. I'm like, I bet it happens before the end of the episode. And of course, it does.
That was my thoughts too. I'm like, yeah, it's going to happen again.
This is just my little aside. Dude, give me a scene where you like wash your face a little bit or do something. You're just there and then you just walk into the small council meeting. No wonder Otto's looking at him like, that's my daughter tasted these days there, man. What the hell, dude? Breath mint? Something? Have a grape? I don't know. Sorry, I
love how when Larys goes to her later and it's like, I was trying to find you, but I was told you were indisposed.
Wasn't that our thing? Yeah. I mean, again, there's just so many more. Look, I can respect Daemon for at least being like a dedicated sociopath. Okay. But the population of the Red Keep is just like slime ball here and slime ball there. So I mean, I guess that's probably why I might be more Team Black than Team Green.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is something we could probably get to later when we get to the end of the episode, but it does change the end of the episode. I mean, the end of the episode is different from the book anyway, but that is one aspect that is different because in the book, Alicent is present for that whole thing, but here she isn't able to be present for it because she's too busy fucking Kristen Cole. So that actually changes a lot. And then Helena goes into her room to tell her, and Helena, it's funny how she's like, Alicent's like, oh my god, you caught us. Helena's like, doesn't even notice because
not even seeing that right now.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll get to that later. But that is another consequence of this change that they made, is that changes the whole dynamic of that ending scene as well.
Because it's interesting when the first scene where he's just going down on her, I was thinking, oh, well, they're probably doing that kind of thing, and so he doesn't want to get her pregnant. But nope, end of the episode, they're full on.
Yeah, well, they got that tea. She can just go to the maester and get some.
Oh, yes.
I hear this tea's pretty effective.
But then, of course, Larys is going to see her do that, though. I've heard you want to get some tea. Anyway.
Can I be there next time? Just
Oh, geez. So, Alex in the chat saying there's a cutscene from season 1 where young Alicent tells a young Rhaenyra that she has feelings for Cole. that actually should have not been cut. Then that would have actually made.
I actually was thinking the opposite. I'm glad that was cut.
Oh, really?
Because I think it would have been too telegraphed then if they had that. I think it's works better because there's more subtle exchanges between the two of them. For her to flat out said it, I think it would have been too on the nose. So I kind of think that it was more subtle.
I don't know. I think it would have added a nice dynamic to explain why Alicent was so jealous of Rhaenyra when she found out that Cole slept with her.
Yeah, I suppose.
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think you can see enough the tension that was going on there where to blatantly spell it out, because as soon as, Rhaenyra and Cole isn't an item, it's immediately Alicent and Cole. So
here's the question. Do you think that they were doing this when Viserys was still alive? Because we don't really know.
We don't know. I don't know. My feeling, my indication was that the fact they didn't show it until this episode was that they weren't. That maybe that was Alicent's line, is that, well, I'm still married, but once her husband died, she's like, all right, well, fucking.
Yeah, I think the tension was there, but I don't know if they actually did anything.
Yeah.
This definitely feels like it's like, well, now we can. You don't have any excuses. You're single.
But there's there's nothing in the show that says that. That was just my feeling.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's no excuses except for, there's nothing stopping them except for his vows. Well, I already broke the vows, so the vows are just, it doesn't matter anymore now, I guess.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this nice small council. Do they call it a small council in this show? Yeah.
I think canonically it's the Green Council versus the Black Council, but I think each one calls themselves the Small Council.
Oh, right. Right. So the Green Council, where we see Aegon kind of fucking around, which, and I've heard some interesting interpretations of why he was so insistent that his son be there at the council. For one thing, I think they are setting us up for, oh, look, he loves his son, cares about his son, to make it more of a sting at the end of it.
Kill him.
Yes, exactly.
In this show, if you haven't read the book, if you see the character that hasn't really been set up for it all, and then all of a sudden there's this big scene with them, worry about them.
Well, yeah, they did the same thing with Luke in the finale.
Yeah, they did the same thing with Luke last year.
But
wow, this is the most we've ever seen of Luke. I'm really excited they're establishing this character. Oh, wow!
But it was, I don't know, but because I think it does make a degree of sense that his father never really showed that any interest in show him what it's like to rule, or really spent much time with him to the point where he thought, oh, he didn't even love me. And so that's why he wanted to sort of show more affection and love for his son. And it seems like I get from the scene that he's kind of, the way I would describe it, he was a good father but a shitty king, because they're sitting there talking about these important war matters and he's just sitting there laughing. Oh, look, he's annoying the Lannister guy. Hey, why don't you ride him, be his royal steed? And they have to be like, hey, Aegon, focus. We're not trying to do a fucking war here. But the other thing interesting about that is that Aemon, he invites Aemon in, and Alicent's just like, what the fuck are you doing here? You're not on the council. And Aegon's like, no, I want him here. So this says a couple things to me. It says that Alicent's still pissed off at him for killing Luke, and that also that Aegon is sort of more on board with Aemon sort of headlong, let's get this over with and kill everyone with dragons kind of thing, and that the adults like Otto are trying to hold them back. Alyssa, it seems like you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, definitely. I picked up on the fact that Aegon was trying to make up for what he didn't get with his father. And I also see it as a this is the kind of Aegon's behavior here. Just he's so immature and he's so not prepared to be king at all. That also probably is a result of his father not taking him to the small council and preparing him to be king, because he was preparing Rhaenyra to be queen. Like that was his heir. So Rhaenyra is much more prepared to be a ruler because her father did that for her, and he didn't do it for Aegon. Like he never thought, like, well, just in case something happens with Rhaenyra. So I think you're seeing the results of that, like him just being a dickwad and like just a goof off and not having any idea how to actually be a king. And I also gotta say I really enjoyed this scene. This is another one that wasn't in the books that I really enjoyed. Not only because it was necessary to to introduce the young Jaehaerys. He's named after the old wise king, Jaehaerys. It was necessary to introduce him to set him up for being killed. I'm sitting there going, "Oh, this little kid is going to get killed at the end of this episode." but it was also just a really fun scene. I love how he really was fucking with Tywin Lannister, and he was just like, "What is the heir to the throne bother you, Tywin Lannister? Why don't you ride? He will give him a pony ride." He really, what he reminded me of is like a more innocent and fun, less sadistic version of Joffrey. Like Joffrey would fuck with people like that, but in a really sadistic way. And this is totally harmless. Like he's not being sadistic at all, but at the same time, it's like we're talking about going to war. Like, pay attention. You're the fucking king. Like he's being a total goof off. But I found that dynamic so funny, and I especially the guy who did Tywin Lannister, the actor who does Tywin Lannister, some of the facial expressions that he gives when he's like, it's like, "Oh, is the heir to the throne bothering you?" Oh, no, not at all, not at all. Yeah, and totally just fucking with him. So I found that scene to just be a really fun thing. But this is again one of the scenes. There's another one that comes a little bit later that really kind of adds to Aegon's character that we didn't get in the first season. Like he actually is like you said, Mark. I think he is a good father. He actually does. He's trying to make up for what he didn't get from his own father. And this is a new layer to this character who, what we know of in season one, rapes his handmaidens and is into child fight club, like that he likes betting on child fight club. So they're adding a little more layers to him. And
some of the competitors are his own bastards too.
Yes, yes, some of the competitors are his own bastards. Yeah. So this is one scene that adds another layer to the character, and then there's another one coming. But yes, I also will agree with you about how he brings Aemond in. Again, it's the men versus women dynamic again. It's although Otto isn't quite as like rushing to war as they are, but he also wanted to just kill Rhaenyra, and he did make like kind of a passive aggressive comment about how like they should have just killed Rhaenyra. He's trying to also exercise a little bit. Otto is trying to do more of the scheming way, where I think it's a little different because I think Alicent is just really trying to hold back, whereas Otto, I think, not necessarily opposed to it, but is trying to be more calculating about it instead of like head on, like let's not think about it, let's run into it kind of thing.
Last season, I compared Otto to Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones, who would write a lot of letters and scheme and do behind the scenes.
He's a less smart Tywin Lannister. I think
yes.
Tywin is like better at it than he is, but yeah, it's the same kind of thing.
Personally, I am shocked that they would present leaders to be unqualified or unprepared for their position. Kind of craziness kind of talking.
That never happens in real life.
Yeah. Never ever happens. Yeah, and you're right. There definitely is that dynamic of the men versus women kind of in this, where she's trying to be a little more straight and talked, and they're just like We're either not paying attention because we're too focused on what our baby's doing on the other side of the room, or we just want to kill everyone. And yeah, Hightower even there. And I think that's one of those where it's like, while you do have these differences, here it's also kind of underlined that each side has a legitimacy to their point, because even Hightower is saying, it's like, look, we could have taken them out straight ahead and then we'd avoid the bloodshed in the war. But you didn't want to do that. So now there's going to be war. There's no way to avoid this. The same way, that we had the other side doing it, that Damon was arguing with Rhaenys about, you could have killed them all right there, but now we're going to have to deal with all of this other stuff. So it's like, yeah, you have a point, but also is just killing people really the first plan you should do? And maybe that's another nice thing about this, because I also thought of Joffrey when I saw of Aegon behind the screen. And again, not as cruel in his approach, but you definitely feel this is establishing that little bit of like, oh, that's right, these people are half the time crazy. They're not all there. And it's like, and we do have an interesting comment on top of that is, yeah, he hasn't been prepared. And so, yeah, he wants to bring his son in, and that's his idea. But if also he's not prepared, so he doesn't even understand the seriousness of any of this. So he can't pay attention, even as we see the scenes later on where he's at the throne just lounging with his buddies. They're trying to come up with the names that he should call himself and stuff. It's like, there's no seriousness. You have a kid here, but at least at this stage, he's a relatively harmless kid, as long as he's not raping, handmaidens and setting up children fight clubs going. They really don't make these guys look good at all. And but just craziness going on all through there. But yeah, I mean, overall, it was really good just to establish the dynamic of like, Alicent is trying to do some steerage and control, and just everybody else around her is losing it. In one way, we either want to go to war, we're not taking it seriously, or we're not paying attention. And, that's how crazy things happen.
So, Brandon in the chat mentioned my microphone was buzzing. Is that still doing it?
You wrote that a while ago. I have not heard it for a while, personally. I was hearing it a little bit too, but you can ask people in the chat. We're still hearing it. But
yeah, just let me know again if it starts doing it. It's very annoying. Anyway, so yeah, no, it was interesting that Alicent is purposely being undermined by Otto, and she even brings that up to him later, which I thought was very interesting, because Alicent tried to chastise Aemon for killing Luke, but then he was like, well, we all made a lot of mistakes after saying, like, really hinting exactly like we should have killed Rhaenyra. But I think that she had like a really good point, and I think that he might have understood what she was saying, that look, if these boys are going to control out of control, and if you want me to control them, you have to legitimize me, but undermining me right in front of them is not helping matter at all. But anyway,
yeah, that's good to say. Can I also say that Otto's a piece of shit too? I don't know. All these guys at the Red Keep, I don't like. Really don't like Otto. When does he die? Don't tell me. I want to. Please let him die.
Well, it's Game of Thrones, all I gotta say. I'm not saying who's gonna die and when, but it's Game of Thrones. So don't expect everyone to live, is all.
Yeah. Alyssa, any thoughts on the Alicent Otto?
I don't think I really have anything to add to what you said. I think I would just say, yeah, I agree. So, yeah.
All right, so let's move on to Rhaenyra. We get a few scenes with her flying around looking for Luke's body, and eventually comes across, I believe it's part of the dragon and like Luke's cloak. and how it was a very interesting scene to me, the way that when she, like, there was a bunch of fishermen and common men, as soon as they see the dragon, they're like, dragon, and just freak out and just runs away. But they're like watching from afar. But it's interesting that, like, of course she like breaks into tears, and it's a very sort of emotional scene. But it's also interesting that the dragon was like let out sort of a scream of pain. And I've heard someone else, like a video I saw on YouTube, describe it that like this, that dragon that was Luke's dragon, they grew up and the dragons knew each other. And actually said that perhaps that was that dragon's, like, the mother was the dragon of that other dragon that died, and that's why it was crying in pain, which is interesting. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, no, I think it was interesting that she got that closure that Rainey's was saying that she needed to have to actually see proof that he was dead. So I thought that was a pretty powerful scene. I don't know, Darren, if you had anything else to add to that.
No, I mean, I will agree that it's powerful. I love the way that it's set up, and you definitely see the emotion and that she needs to. However, you don't see a body. Are they really dead? That's the only thing that my wife and I were talking. Now, I believe from that kind of fall and everything, and I think you saw his body stumbling off, that 99.9% sure that he's dead. But when she found that, like, jacket or cloak or whatever it was, I was like, well, that looks like something he shuffled off as he was trying to swim away or something like that. I am trained by TV and movies. Again, if I don't see a body, then did it actually happen yet? So I will just throw that out there, that I do have to put it in a solid position that perhaps Luke is still alive somewhere. But we'll wait and see that. But yeah, that's the only thing that I would say with any of this is no body, then they're not dead for sure yet. And yeah, and I like that they had this moment again. This is one of those where it was like you had to have this, and you had to have the funeral, and you have those last little moments, but they didn't dwell on them too much. I think they had their moments. They told the emotional bits that they did. I think, Rhaenyra had this great moment, connecting and accepting that she has lost her kid, and she gets back, and she's like, yeah, you can have she and Damon have that little communication, like, okay, we're ready to move on, and that things can become. Again, it's the setup that's necessary in season one, and I like the fact that they didn't dwell too long on it.
Yeah, so what's going to happen, Darren, is there's going to be this huge war. They're going to destroy all of Westeros. It's all going to be burnt in flames, and just everybody's going to be dead except for Rhaenyra and a few other people. And then Luke is just going to come strolling in, eating an apple. I'm like, hey, Mom, what did I miss?
Because they want to show how much of an asshole he is. Okay, yeah, I see it. You guys been busy?
Did I miss something? Like, well, we only started the whole war because we thought you were dead. No, as far as I know, that is probably not what's going to happen.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've been programmed by TV, so I got to throw that out there. It wasn't even like an arm, or, be great if his head was all caught up in there with a little look of,
Yeah, but
maybe that's too much.
I have to really, really shout out Emma Darcy and their, like, non-verbal acting in this episode is just so good. It's to the point where I didn't notice that Rhaenyra only actually has one line until after the episode where that was pointed out to me, and I was like, "Oh, that's right. Rhaenyra only actually has one line because Emma Darcy speaks volumes with their body language and their facial acting, and it's just so good. This is one of the scenes where that's true, and that continues in any scene that we see Rhaenyra in. But I think this was probably one of the more powerful ones. There's another really good one that we'll get to a little bit later that I really liked. But yeah, so that's kind of to this conversation.
Yeah, I think what also helped with this scene is the makeup, because she looked very dirty. So it gave you that sense that she'd been out there for days searching.
I totally did not realize she only had one line in the whole episode. And you're right. It's a testament to her performance, because I could have thought that there was all sorts of stuff going on, but it was all emotion. It was all face. It was all expression.
Yeah, she actually only speaks one line in this whole episode, and it's amazing to like realize that.
Yeah. No. That's just, that kind of blows me away. I'm like excited to go rewatch the episode now just for that, to be perfectly honest.
All right, so going back to King's Landing, it's interesting. It seems like they're brewing a little conflict between Aegon and Otto, because we have that scene with Aegon on the doing petitions in the throne room, and how he's like, "Oh yes, so you want your sheep? Here you go. I will give you all the sheep you want." And Otto's like, "Excuse me, like, not a good idea. We can't. There's like a reason why we took those sheep in the first place. You promised them to him, you have to promise them to everyone." And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, okay." It also shows like how untrained Aegon is to be king, and has Viserys never trained him to king. And there's a reason for that. Is because he wanted Rhaenyra to succeed him, which is why it's a bad idea to put him on the throne. But anyway, it's all. Then we get another petition from a blacksmith. And this time he's like, yeah, when he says, yes, we'll give you the money in advance, and Otto like gets ready to step up and say something, you can tell Aegon's like, no, small folk are important and we need it for the war effort. And he just walks away. So because I think he took the hint that Aegon was going to overrule him on that one. But then we also get Larys, good old creepy Larys, whispering poison in his ears, being like, "Oh, your grandsire, he served as 3 kings. I believe maybe his time has come." So that's interesting. It does sort of imply that people are, because I think they might be trying to get rid of Otto because they can tell that he's the real power, and that Aegon himself is easily manipulated. And so Larys gets rid of Otto, he can put whoever he wants in charge. So it's a scheming, typical Game of Thrones scheming. So it's setting up some interesting things. But anyway, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, well, I'll get to Larys in a moment. I do have some things to say about him, but backtracking to the scene with Aegon, yeah, this is another scene that kind of really adds to his character. And I don't know that it necessarily shows that he cares about the small folk as much as maybe he wants people to like him. Like he wants to be viewed as this good king. So like, oh, you need sheep? Yeah, I'm a good king. Like me. Like, please like me. Cheer for me again next time I go out. And because I noticed that, at that scene last year where he's coronated, where up to that point he's like, I don't really want to be king, but then you could see the change where he's like, yeah, I'm king, everybody loves me. Like that he's getting that thrill part. So I think it's motivated by maybe not as much that like he's a generally nice guy to the small folk, because this is the child fight club guy, but that he, it does add nuance to his character, though. That he does at the very least, he will act out of kindness, to be liked. And yeah, it does set up an interesting dynamic between him and Otto. And it is, Larys is not totally wrong. That Otto is definitely manipulating him. That's Otto manipulated Viserys. But Larys, I've heard him referred to, I think going back to last season, but then also this season, I've heard people refer to him as the little finger of the show, and he definitely is. I was trying to gauge of whether he was trying to get power for himself. Was he trying to make a play for hand, or was he trying to just, more likely, knowing him, probably get the person that he could control in hand rather than himself being the hand? But he's definitely little fingering it up. He's definitely trying to create chaos and use that ladder from the chaos. What exactly his ends are is it's hard to tell. But it was also true of Littlefinger. You weren't always sure exactly what he was doing in any given moment. But it's all very calculated. It's all very planned. And I do want to just kind of throw out an interesting change from the book that I'm not sure why they did it, other than because in the book Laris is the master of whispers and he's on the small council. But my only thing is that, like, maybe they were like, well, Laris and Varys, it rhymes. Maybe we don't want to have two masters of whispers with rhyming names. But also maybe that he just works better not on the small council and just kind of flying under people's radar and kind of operating in the shadows. So I think that actually might be a good reason to, like, not have him on the small council. And I think it actually works really well for this character. It just makes him even more creepy that he's just sort of lurking around, like, just kind of operating in the shadows and is not in the forefront in any way. Is not on the small council. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, when I rewatched season 1 recently, every time they referred to him as Lord Laris, I thought they were saying Lord Varys. Like, it just sounds like, I'm just so used to that.
Yeah, actually, having your name end in Eris is a requirement for being Master of Whispers. It's one of those small little things. People don't always notice that part. Yeah, honestly, I thought of more of a worm tongue than a Littlefinger, just because at least Littlefinger had some style and stuff. Laris is just creepy. It's like he's creepy on a good day. As for Aegon, to me, this is really a beautiful and simple example of Otto Hightower's failings, because he has been planning this for years, and Aegon is entirely unprepared for it. This is not a Tywin Lannister move right here by any way, shape, or form. And obviously, you had different connections and expectations and stuff, and Hightower would have been doing this, but because he was doing this behind the scenes and this was his plan, we're going to betray the true heir, and we're going to put my granddaughter's kid or my daughter's kids on the throne. He really did not, even the fact that going into this meeting and didn't do an aside bit like, okay, so this is how this works. They're going to come up. A lot of it's going to be there. You're going to weigh and consider. And again, just even from this is your first thing, let's do this. But he doesn't. He just lets Aegon go up there completely unprepared, like hey, I'm the new king and I want everyone to love me type kind of bit. And at least he's not cruel. I mean, right, if we're going to compare him to Joffrey being in that same position, he's not cruel. He's just unprepared. He has no idea what even the weight of any of these things. He doesn't know how anything works at all. So there's no way that he can responsibly respond to anything. And the fact that Otto puts him in this position, to me, it further underlines, while Otto may be scheming, he's not really preparing. And maybe that ends up being a difference between him and Laris, where Laris seems to be really working those edge corners and setting things up, while Otto is really more of just like, I've got my plans and ideas and putting positions in, but I haven't really prepared for what actually happens, once I get this. It's like the dog chasing a car. Okay, he has no idea what he's going to do once he actually gets the car.
Yeah, he really is the poor man's Tywin Lannister. But Tywin Lannister was like the he's playing 3D chess. He's planning 20 moves ahead, whereas Otto 2 moves ahead at max. I mean, don't forget that Otto is the one who initially wanted Rhaenyra to be named heir because he didn't want Daemon. Like, it's just in the moment, it was like, oh no, we can't have Daemon. No. And so he's actually the one who first suggested Rhaenyra be named heir because of that. Not thinking ahead. And then after that happened, he was like, oh yeah, maybe I could get my daughter in there and then we can create sons. And now his plan has changed. And he's not very good at scheming. Like, he doesn't think far enough ahead. And I think that's what we're seeing here.
He's also not Charles Dance. So, just get a different quality of presentation. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so but another speaking of Laris, we get another scene with him when he goes to Alicent and it's like basically telling her that he found out who all the spies were that were working for Myceria. And she's like, "Oh, so what happened to them? They are no longer breathing our air," which I thought was an interesting way of just saying I fucking killed them. And then you get the follow up to that where Alicent is having a bath and all her handmaidens are like baiting her. And she's like, "Get out! I can do it myself." And so I didn't realize this until it was pointed out to me, but it was actually like someone suggested that it's because Laris hired all their new servants and so now they all work for him, and so she's kind of creeped out about now they're spying on her for him, and that's why she was like kicking them out. And of course the whole thing where Laris is like, "You were indisposed, I was looking for you," so she's really suspicious. Oh, he knows that I'm sleeping with Cole and everything like that, and she's just all creeped out about him.
Yeah, I think 100%. That's exactly what's going on here. So that's why she's like, get away! Like she's gonna have a hard time now. She can't trust her handmaidens anymore. She can't trust any of the servants because, yeah, Laris served her purposes in the past, but she knows that he is not anyone to be trusted, and so that's going to create an interesting dynamic moving forward, I think.
Well, she is totally unprepared to deal with someone like Laris. Again, that's one thing we're seeing on Green all over the place is everyone is very unprepared for what they're having to deal with. So yeah, and I get this, but also I think there was something else too. I think it's one of those. It's like starting to realize that this blood isn't going to wash off because she does just get in there and then she's just like working that one point over and over. And to me, that's again, I don't think anything's done by mistake here. As that is telling us, it's like she's going to come out, she's going to wear this skin off of this and just can't keep it clean. I just can't get it all off of me. They're just. I just like that because it's like there's definitely the Laris stuff, but I think it's like the dirt isn't coming off and it's starting to dawn on her what she's really gotten herself into and what the road ahead of her is. So yeah, that was kind of a nice little, I think a very cool and creepy moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching back to Team Black, we get Rhaenyra's return, which I actually kind of, the more I think about it, the more I think that Daemon actually is showing that he does really care about her because he goes up and is like kind of close to her and tries to embrace her and it's like, did you take care of what you needed to take care of? Basically, but she kind of brushes him off and just is really upset. And I think I can't remember correctly, but I think when they're doing the basic like call out the Queen of the Andals in the first one, that it's kind of the audio they tweaked it a bit to make it a bit like echoey or hollow to sort of give her perspective that she's not really hearing it or listening to it because she's just too consumed by everything. So she just goes up and is like, "I want Aemon," and I think we'll get to what Daemon does later in response to this, but I think that he means well, that he is trying to fulfill her wish of her saying that she wants Aemon. But on top of that, after we get her return, and that was her one line in the episode. Again, it was a poignant, strong line. But after her return, we also get Jace's return, which was also really lovely, powerful moment where he's trying to report, but he's just in tears and crying, and they embrace each other. That was really lovely. And then we get a funeral for Luke where they basically just throw all of his belongings in the fire, which is, I think, needed and also lovely. But and also they have a nice shot of I can't remember her name, but one of Daemon's daughters who was betrothed to Luke, showing how she's affected because her betrothal was is now dead. But it's interesting that they juxtapose that with Alicent giving her prayers to the dead, and she's kind of looking at this candle, thinking about it, and she says for Lucaris Valerian. So she shows that she sort of still cares, but I wonder how true that's going to be in the next episode. But it was an interesting juxtaposition there. So, Darrin, we'll start with you. Any thoughts on that?
No, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I think that those were all beautiful moments. Yeah, you definitely had that suppressed sound from Rhaenyra's point of view. Of she's just focused and everything else is distant. I think they did that very well. I liked the little moment with her and Daemon, and yeah, when Jason comes back and he's really trying to like be the prince and give his report, and it's hitting him, and yeah, I got all teared up watching it. I just this is what they've done really, really well. And Alyssa, yeah, I completely agree. The silence, the emotional acting that we got to see through all of these moments, I think it carried it all. Even when she gets to say her one line and get me, Aragon, you're right. It's strong and it's poignant, and the fact that that is the one word that she says and everything else is all just reflectory is I think gorgeous. And yeah, I think Daemon loves Rhaenyra and wants her to be the queen and sees her as the queen. I think he is battling with his own, the fact that he just does what he wants to do and he thinks he knows the way to do it, and he can't deal with any, he doesn't know how to deal with somebody who's not on board with him. And I kind of like that dynamic between Rhaenyra and Daemon even then as well, as he gets aggressive with her and she's just kind of like, am I the queen or not? Type kind of thing. Again, all quietly. So there's so much that's being said. I mean, that you're going to use a visual medium and just tell a visual story. I have to, I got to give props to them for focusing on that, because I won't say what, but sometimes you can overly do your dialogue for your emotional catharsis. And sometimes you just need to see what a character is going through to get all of that without having to hear line after line of dialogue. So I really love the choices. And again, the fact that they didn't dwell too long, but they did them, they hit us, and then they moved on. As I think was wonderfully done.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And yeah, the scene with when Jace comes back, that was the scene I was talking about earlier that I just really impactful scene. Again, not in the book. Most of this from this episode is not in the book. And we do get to, they also were able to slip in a little of exposition. So we do get to find out that he did in fact go to the Vale, and that Lady Jane agreed to support them as long as that they sent a dragon to protect them, which I imagine we shall see a little bit later in the season that will play out. So we get to slip that in into a scene that was, again, it's all about the facial expression, the emotion, the body language, the emotional acting here, because Jace doesn't come in there and go, "Oh, I'm so sad Lucerys is dead," and then she goes, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna miss him." They don't mention him at all. He's going in to try to give her this report, and he breaks down in the middle of the report and he can't finish it, and then they hug each other. I mean, that is so much more powerful than if they like tried to do like "Oh, poor Luke, we miss him so much," and blah blah blah, and like just telling us. This is showing, not telling, at its finest. Like this is what they mean when they say show not tell. Like this is just magnifique. Just such a powerful scene, and to see between mother and son. Now one of her two surviving sons, now that she's lost one, and which I think was probably going to bring them closer together. So just Yeah, I loved all of this stuff. I'm focusing in on this one bit, but all the Rhaenyra stuff here was just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Very powerful stuff. All right, so then we get actually I think this happened kind of earlier in between these scenes, but we get a scene with the did we see Alan again? Was he the one boarding the ship?
No, I think the guy who found Mysteria was Arik or Eric.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because she says there were two of you last I saw.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
that's right.
Which there's one is Arik with an A and one is Eric with an E, and I don't know who is who, but it's the point of him
Eric.
Eric who works for Rhaenyra. Yeah, that's.
But yeah, that was interesting that we get Mysaria. So I suppose this is what happened after Larys burned her whole house down or whatever at the end of last season, of which I knew she wasn't dead. But we see because we didn't see a body. But anyway,
the books. So.
Well, yes, that too. But they can always change it. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because at first I thought that she was intending to go to Dragonstone, but then I started to realize that no, she was just trying to get away, and she got caught by Daemon because she clearly didn't want to be around them, and was kind of just like, oh, fuck this. And I think it's very interesting that the scene we got, the brief scene we got with, I'll just call him Eric, and Daemon, after when Eric was trying to stick out for her, and he's like, oh, this is about honor, but Daemon seems to be really pissed off with him and being like, and he's like, no, I risked everything to come and support my queen. He's like, well, why didn't you kill Aegon? You should have done this. And I think Daemon's being a bit unreasonable and just being a dick and kind of like seeing enemies everywhere. And I think maybe part of it is that he was just talking to Mysaria and he got really pissed off with her and it was transferring that anger to him. But yeah, that was kind of interesting. But eventually, it was interesting. Eventually, Daemon, like once Rhaenyra comes back and says, "I want Aemon," and so he starts to get the idea that he could use Mysaria. And I like at first she was like, "No, I'm not going to be your puppeter anymore," or whoever. He was like, "Okay, it was a simple transaction." Then because she was talking about transactions with Otto, and so obviously gets the hookups and the information from her. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting way to use her. And in fact, I'm not sure what they're going to do with her because they changed her storyline a bit from the book. So I'm not sure exactly what she's going to be up to this season, which is interesting for me. But anyway, Alyssa, your thoughts on her?
She's going to be up to something because there's the trailer where she's like, there's more than one way to fight a war or something.
I thought she was going to say that in this episode. I kept
I did too. But she didn't. So she's gonna be back in the game again. She's gonna be up to something. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. I did want to add something more to the Eric scene because when Daemon said, why didn't you kill Aegon? He's like, hey, listen, I swore these vows to protect not only the king and queen, but the entire royal family. What the hell am I supposed to do when the royal family is fighting each other? And Daemon didn't really have a response to that because it's like kind of a good point. That kind of quelled his anger a little bit. Just like, okay, well, fair point. I mean, didn't say that, but I think. But I thought that was a great line because it really shows like the conundrum that these different characters are facing. Like the Kingsguard have to choose sides, and as it happens, the brothers end up on opposite sides. But you have to pick which part of the royal family you're now going to swear your allegiance to, and that's like not what they were trained for. That's not what they had been preparing for. So that was an interesting line. But as far as Daemon and Mysaria, yeah, I think that Daemon saw that I think that there is something to, he does really kind of care about Rhaenyra. He saw that she was hurting. He saw that she said, I want Aemond, and I think Daemon was like, "Oh, cool. Well, this is my area of expertise. I can help you. You want to kill somebody? I can do that." And this is where that nuance of these scenes I'm talking about. Whereas, like, I do feel that Rhaenyra and Daemon are more directly culpable for what happens, but here you could definitely. Rhaenyra did not intend for the end result of this episode. But if you're going to say that to Daemon, and then Daemon's going to go to Massaria, I mean, what that made me think of is, for all these Star Trek fans, is Cisco going to Garrick. It's like, that's, if you're going to put that out there for those kind of people, then some shady things are going to happen. So in an indirect way, I do kind of hold Rhaenyra culpable for what ends up happening. Even her just saying, "I want Aemond," is not, she didn't want that particular result, but she also kind of laid the groundwork for that to end up happening. Point being, Daemon and Massaria, very sketchy people, very sketchy people. So yeah, that was all really interesting to me. And yeah, I'm with you, Mark, and wondering, like, how she's going to fit back into the story, but we know she is, so we'll see.
Yeah, I can see the next scene with Rhaenyra. She's like, "Amen." I said, "Amen, amen." You're the one who came up with some son for a son type. I said, "Amen." She could do a whole bit for it. Yeah, actually, the only thing that I was really going to point out was just what you did at the end there, Alyssa, is that line from Eric about, "I'm here to defend the whole family. What am I supposed to do?" Because it's a perfect throwback, is that even Damon's doing it. Even we're seeing Otto on his end. They're like, "Why didn't you stop this before? Why didn't you kill this person for me? Why didn't you do this thing for me when you shouldn't have?" It's like, dude, why didn't you do it? Why are you looking at me? Why haven't I done these things for you already? And so, yeah, I think this was kind of a perfect throwback for that, because, yeah, he doesn't really bring it up anymore after that. Damon's got nothing to respond to that. Like, man, a week from now, when I come up with a really good comeback, you're going to hear from me. So yeah, I'm definitely going to put more blame on Aemond or Daemon for having a poor plan, and then hiring two idiots to pull off a poor plan, or at least an idiot and maybe just basic city guard. And we all know how guards work in these shows, right? Guards are the easiest ones that you fool or kill or knock out. So,
more blame goes to Daemon for sure. I'm not saying.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I know. Rhaenyra, like, you should know better than to let him loose.
Yeah, I'm just saying she's not totally innocent in all of this. You're setting the stage for the. But yes, Daemon is absolutely more to blame.
Yeah,
and the most to blame would probably arguably be Blood and Cheese, but we'll get to that.
But yeah, no, it's definitely fun, because especially with these little side characters, with a little Whisper here, as well as Larys over in there. Once those scenes come on, it's kind of like, oh yeah, the Game of Thrones is back on. And just in case you guys weren't paying attention, it's already being played by everyone else. You're doing catch up at this point.
Yeah, I do get the idea. I think we might have talked about this in season 1, that Mysaria is kind of like Varys and Larys is like Littlefinger, and it's the same sort of adversarial relationship they had.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was pretty much it.
Didn't she have like little spiders or something instead of birds? Like Varys had little birds.
Yeah, Varys had the little birds, and I think hers were spiders or something.
Yeah,
that sounds right to me. Yeah,
but it's child exploitation, folks. That's what it is. No matter how you look at it.
But even though Larys had all of her the servants that were working for her killed, it seems to be implied that she still has a bunch of spies over there, and people are sympathetic because she's able to point Daemon in the direction of Blood and Cheese.
She probably doesn't as much inside the castle, since Larys probably killed them all, but that doesn't mean she doesn't have connections.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so getting the blood and cheese, because I knew it was coming because I read the books, I was noticing all the shots of rats they were showing earlier in the episode, and seeing they even showed cheese setting rat traps at one point. I think a couple times. I only noticed him once though. And of course, we get the line from Helena where she's like, "I'm not scared of dragon, I'm scared of rats." And everyone's like, What the fuck are you talking about? But this is the continuing the tradition of her being sort of psychic or fortune telling or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
She would just say weird, creepy shit that actually turns out to be true.
A dreamer, I believe, is what they call them in the Turkish.
Okay, right. But on that topic, I think like in season 1, when she said beware of the beast beneath the boards, I think some of us who read the books were thinking she was referring to blood and cheese, but after watching this episode, I think she was just talking about Rhaenys and her dragon.
Yeah, I just didn't think there were boards there, but I yeah, I actually wasn't really sure which one she was talking about.
Yeah.
But I think she was, and because here she just flat out says rats, like she's
Yeah.
The
I
rats
wasn't sure until this episode.
Yeah. The focusing on the rats is not unique to this episode. They were doing that all last season.
Oh, yes, no, true.
Last season they were focusing on these little rats.
Well, that's what was making me think that Cheese sucks at his job. Because there are rats everywhere.
Well, you can see he's not a very bright guy. He wouldn't be a very effective rat catcher.
Yeah. But yes, so we get the whole blood and cheese thing. Damon showing up, and this. So I'll try not to get too much into the books, but one change I thought was very interesting was the whole "bring me Aemon" thing, because that was not in the books. Like, again, this is like a history perspective, and they probably didn't know exactly what happened. But they seem to think that they purposely went in to kill Aegon's son. But, it could have been the case where they didn't. I think it's a good change. I really like it. I think it makes a bit more sense that they would set out to kill Aemon. They just hired 2 idiots who just go and kill the wrong one.
And honestly, it's like killing Aemon. That's a really hard. He's a seasoned fighter.
Yes,
like that would be a really hard task. What, killing a little kid? Pretty easy. So
But I get the impression that the plan was to sort of catch him off guard.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is a kind of a ridiculous plan to send these 2 idiots to go get, or at the very least, like a fighter and being led by an idiot. But I think it's an important one because it makes sense that he's there to get Aemon and not just some sort of revenge. There has to be a focus. But they do give that one moment where he's like, well, what if I can't find him? And you just get that shot of Daemon's face. And you kind of think that he's looking at like, well, you're going to fucking find him and then you're going to take care of him because that's it. Though I think afterwards that implies that he might have said, well, a son for a son. Then.
Exactly. So that's interesting that they cut the scene there, because then we don't know what he said, that maybe he just said a son for a son or something like that. And
because later you hear Blood going, well, the man said son for a son. And like, did we actually see him say that?
Yeah, no. But
I don't think so. Yeah,
I don't think that he did. I think that he said that in that scene that we cut, so that when they get to that, we as the audience are like, "What the fuck?" Because otherwise, it would be on our mind. Like, if you don't, well, then go after Aegon's son. We'd be kind of expecting it. I think that that's the way to shock us, to give us they're going after Aemon, and that's the plan. And the minute they can't find it, she says, "Oh, I found the queen. We could go after the other one. He said a son for a son." Then you're like, what?
I mean, I could buy that might have been his backup plans. Well, if you can't find Aemon,
yeah, I really do think See, Damon is a little more vengeful than Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is like, it's got to be Aemon, and Damon is like, well, if you can't get Aemon, whatever. So yeah, I think he was like, well, a son for a son, whatever, just kill a son.
Just anybody'll do. Just bring me a head. I don't care whose head, as long as there's white hair on it. 1 eye, 2 eyes, whatever.
It'll be interesting to see Damon's reaction if we get to see that at all, like after.
Yeah.
After
I have a feeling they might
like. Is he gonna pay them because it was like, I give you half now and I give you half after?
Yeah.
And then is he going to carry the baby head back or whatever? I mean, yeah, it's.
I have a feeling they might cut past that, but I kind of hope they don't. I hope.
Yeah, they may.
Yeah. But so Imperium in the chat's got an interesting comment saying Daemon was not dumb enough to send those 2 idiots to kill Aemon. I think he expected them to fail. He just wanted to send a message to Aemon that he can be touched. I don't know. Maybe. I think he actually thought that. I think he wanted them to catch him off guard.
He did, but also I think that could be the backup plan of like, well, if you can't actually kill him, and we're sending a message at the very least.
Yeah, true. Yeah, at least.
Well, because he's taking a big move, and I think he's coming here in order to satisfy Rhaenyra. He loves Rhaenyra. She's the queen. He wants her to be happy and to focus then on the rest of the war. But I think that this is one of his faults is, I want revenge, but any revenge will do.
So Darrin, I wanted to ask you, since you hadn't read the books, like how you found this scene. Like, was it like shocking, or was it, oh, this is a Game of Thrones type thing, or did you think it was too much, or?
No, I don't think it was too much. I think it was perfectly in line with Game of Thrones. I think it was absolutely horrifying, and I think that it was exactly the purpose that you wanted to, for the exact reasons that we were discussing it. And the fact that, I mean, and honestly, even that whole scene where he asks, like, which is the son, and you could see that going on with Elena, and then she points out, and he's like, oh, well, he's not going to give up the heir that much. And how Cheese is actually, like, just staring at her like, no, she's telling the truth. Just, again, reading all of that conflict and thought and line and what's going on in that face. And the fact that she runs out and runs into Alicent rooms, of course, busy banging Cole. And she's like, oh, I hope they didn't see it. He's like slinking out from the bed covers, like, can I get out of bed without anybody actually seeing me? And the covers was completely ridiculous. Because, of course, Helena's just, she's a little more focused on something else. She maybe just seeing forms. There's not any like legitimacy like going on in that head there. I mean, I think
she just doesn't give a shit.
I think it did exactly. I think it paid the point exactly what it is. How messed up all of this is. What terrible ideas that Daemon has. And how this is going to just, again, it's like everybody's idiot mistakes now just is going to make everything worse and worse. And again, I don't know how it goes. I mean, I think I know overall basically which side wins by the end of this. But I think that they did this perfectly because, again, this is the idiocy involved. Look, Daemon, if you're not going into the Red Keep to go kill Aemon yourself, you're asking for someone else's trouble. I mean, in that way, I think Imperium kind of hits it. I don't know if I completely agree. Like, if the point was just to send a message, I think this is Daemon just trying to give the business end away to someone else, and maybe not caring even how it ends up as long as he gets something out of it. But this is it's just going to create more complications forward. And of course, that's good for good drama. But it was horrifying.
Now, Alyssa, at the start, you seem to imply you thought this was adapted very well, because I've heard opinions from some people like, oh, they totally ruined it. The books were way better, which I don't agree with.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about at the beginning. How there's But there's always going to be those people. If anything, anytime you adapt anything from the source material and you don't do it word for word. They changed what I was expecting to happen. And yet, see, the thing is, like, the book is worse. Like, as
much worse.
how brutal it is and how horrifying it is. They toned it down. Like, they reined it in a little bit. And I think that there are people who wanted them to do it exactly how it was in the book. But I actually have been saying, in my spoilery videos since last year that they gotta tone it down. They have to, like, I mean, like, I don't want to see like blood gushing out of this little kid's throat. We did hear it, which was gross enough. That was pretty disgusting, but still, like, I didn't need the visual, which you get it described in the book. Like, I don't want like to see like some kid's head laying on the ground. Like, this is we live in a society now where children are gunned down in schools all the time. Child murder is a very sensitive topic. It's very triggering, rightfully so, to a lot of people. Like, I came into this season like both excited and nervous for how are they going to do this, because you can't skip it. It's so important to the story. It is so important. Just, Lucerys' death and this are the two things that really launch us full on into war. You can't not have it in there. So it's like, but how are they going to do this? Like, you have to be very careful how you do that. You want it to still be horrifying. You want it to still have that impact, but you can't go too far, be too gratuitous, which worked for the book, but to put it in a visual medium, to go a little too far and be too gratuitous, I think, which is it would rub a lot of people the wrong way. So I always felt like they gotta do this tastefully, or as tastefully as they can do it, and yet still maintain that sense of like horror and like disgust that it should elicit in people. And with that, and I think Darrin, reacting the way that you did without reading the book, I think it kind of, I don't want to say prove, but really solidifies my point that that they did a great job and walking kind of that tightrope of, making sure that the audience still feels the way that they should feel from this horrified, and yet not have it be too far on the other end of just being like feeling like it's gratuitous.
The reverse shot with a squelching sound as those guys are dropping. Yeah, that was all you needed. We all pictured everything they wanted to. No. That's, again, sometimes you visually want to tell a story. Sometimes just a sound can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a good use of sound, but and also of not being too gratuitous.
Yeah.
But if Darrin, if you don't mind me telling you what happened in the book, one thing that they changed was they show in the book she had 2 sons and a daughter. And so when the Blood and Cheese showed up and they're like, okay, you gotta tell us which one of your boys we're gonna kill, because it's a son for a son, but we're only gonna kill one. The rest of you are gonna be fine. But tell us which son. So she picks the younger son because she thinks he's too young, and maybe to understand what's going on, and that the other one's the heir. So they go to the young son and say, "Oh, you see that? Your mom wants you dead," and then they kill the older son instead. And so that's what some people are missing. They're like all upset that the show didn't do it that way. Although I think we noticed in season 1 that they didn't show her having 2 sons in the show. So is that something we talked about before, like in season 1? Because I don't know
if we talked about it or not. But
So
but they still do a form of that, and having her like point to which one it is.
Yes.
I think that, to me, that works better for this. I think having it done the other way on the show, I think that it just would have been too far.
Yes.
Plus, I'm also like, I'm good, and I feel the same way about the Game of Thrones books. I'm good with cutting out characters. because the youngest son like has this other storyline that I found very boring and that's like well, that now appear like if they're cutting that character out, like that whole storyline will be gone, and I'm great with that. Like there's a lot of things in the book. I'm rereading it right now. Still, is that are like these like long descriptions of battles with all these dudes that I don't care about. That houses that I've never even heard of that aren't in the original Game of Thrones. I'm like, here's Lord Greybeard of Greytown. And I'm like, I don't care about any of this. And so, so like, I think what happens with that, the youngest son in the book is kind of like goes into that category and is like, yeah, cut characters. Let's streamline this thing. So, and then they still have the essence of that scene where they still make her point to a child. It's just a little different. I think that people read things on the page and it really has an emotional effect on them, and they expect to see that word for word on the screen, and then get upset when they don't see that, not being able to recognize that this is actually pretty brilliant, that this is actually pretty well written as well.
Yeah, and I think because the point of that, her having to choose was so she would be really affected and scarred by it, but that definitely is still going to happen with the events how they played out in this show. And I think it's interesting how when she pointed at the correct child, at the boy, and I think the reason for that, and it's very interesting, the reason for that is because she wanted to make sure that they didn't kill them both. Because if they killed the girl and found out, oh, this is the wrong one, then they go and kill the other one as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and it just will be really interesting to see like how this does affect her moving forward, because in the book it really fucks her up. So I mean, she still had to point to her son, like to have him killed. So that's gotta fuck her up. And there was something else I was going to say about this that escaped me, so maybe it'll come back in my head.
But Darrin, do you have any thoughts on the changes?
No, I mean, honestly, I think Alyssa, you hit it right. I think just streamlining story. Why add extra complications or extra bits? You can put a focus then on the price that Helena has to pay versus the choices that the murderers made and so on. Because if you're like, oh, I point to one, but then I choose the other, it takes more responsibility on them on the choice. Where this one, again, it keeps it clean. It's A or B, and one's going to have to carry the weight of that cost, and the other one's going to have to deal with exacting that price. And I think it's much better. And yeah, not showing it, doing it the way that they did, I think they let the terror dwell in our heads as opposed to on the screen. And I think that's much scarier if you can set it up right.
I remembered what I was going to say. I saw a YouTube video or podcast or something where someone pointed out that making this change of not having the younger son exist raises the stakes, because now there's no male heir.
Yes.
There's still a male heir, at least. Now Aegon does not have a male heir because they killed the one and only. So that actually raises the stakes for war even higher. So that's a really interesting aspect of doing it that way as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that is the one thought that I had watching. It was like, well, I guess they can make another heir.
Is she going to be up for sexy time now, though? After the
but see, that's an excellent point. Is I think you're right. It does raise the stakes. There is no other heir. There's the pressure of that. Now you have the drama of what that she has to deal with, and how is Aegon going to respond? Again, it's much more fertile ground for storytelling, as opposed to just like, oh, that's horrible. Well, at least we got a backup.
Yeah.
Thank God for that. Sure. Back up your computer, back up your hard drive, back up your kid. That's the lesson.
Get a backup error.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was thinking of when I first read this passage, I thought the way that Helena was portrayed in it is like I couldn't see this fitting into the way she was portrayed in the show. She seemed to act like really differently, and so I think what they did in the show actually fit more with what her character and her type of sort of weird person.
Yeah, they turned her into this weird, like kind of crazy person, and yet a psychic actually, and like this. That's all new to the show. Like she wasn't in the book, so they changed her character. So you're right. The way they rewrote it kind of fits her more.
Well, and it's cooler because she's crazy because she sees the future. So she doesn't know what reality she's seeing and dealing with all the time. Puts her in an interesting place, but also keeps off from just being the weird girl or whatever. There is some purpose. And since you're going to have people only saying so many lines per episode or per season, doing this focuses what she is going to say. It's either going to be a feint or it's going to be a hint of things to come in some, illusory way.
Now, no, go ahead.
What I'm really wondering about this character, since they did make this change, is at any point is anyone going to figure out that she's actually psychic? Like it's over everyone's head. No one.
I don't think so.
These things like, he's going to have to lose an eye, and then he loses an eye. Like she keeps making these prophecies, and no one picks up on it. Like, is there going to be a character who's smart enough? Like I could see like a Massaria being really smart enough to do, but she's may not ever encounter her, or a Lair. I don't know. Is anyone ever going to be like, oh, she's psychic? Like I'm really curious, or if this is going to go the whole show and like nobody's going to pick up on it.
There's an interesting comment to be made either way, to be honest. You just give her the Cassandra syndrome where she can see the future, but nobody listens to her or believes her.
Yeah.
Is an interesting one because it just makes her more tragic. Yeah. Versus, is there someone else later on that kind of like picks up on, hey, maybe we need to pay more attention? I mean, I don't know what the overall format of the story is, so I don't know where people are going to end up going, but it's an interesting bit. I mean,
well, I get the impression they go more the Cassandra route, and I think that's what they've been doing so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what they've been doing so far, but I was just wondering if at some point is somebody gonna be like, hey.
I mean, it's possible, but I don't think they will personally. Yeah. But one thing that
for their own advantage.
One thing that they did in the books that I really, really hope they do in the show, and again, this is not really a spoiler, so you don't have to worry about it, but after this event happens, they kill all the rat catchers and bringing 100 cats. I want to see 100 cats on the show.
I hope they do that too. Like, and just like having on have a line like, "Oh, all the rat catchers are dead," and then cut to like all these cats. Right?
Yeah, I want to be like cats in the background of every scene.
It makes me wonder. Like when I read that, I was like, "Why didn't they just have cats in the first place?" Like,
yeah.
There are cats in like the Game of Thrones, aren't there?
Yeah. Well, maybe that's why they're there now, because they were brought in here.
Yeah, should have just hired. See, that's why you always go with cats over rat catchers.
And then you will have the cat herder. And we'll have the whole adventures there. It's just frustrating moments.
Yeah. Yeah, I think. Well, I had one more thing to say about this, but I'm not remembering what it was. Oh well. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that means we've covered everything.
Oh no, I know. I remember.
There we go.
I remember. It was Kristen Cole and Allison, because some people were complaining that they didn't like how they changed it so that they were sleeping, because originally Allison was in the room with Elena, but they changed it so she was sleeping with Kristen Cole at the time. I like it. I think
much better change. Yeah.
I think it's going to add an interesting dynamic with Kristen Cole blaming himself for not being on duty, for literally fucking around.
Is he though? He seems to have lost all of his morals. I was thinking where Allison was going to be. Like,
true. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's a good
like
one.
maybe like, oh, if only I were there, or if I could have done something. But maybe Kristen will too. I just feel like Kristen is incapable of feeling guilty.
Yeah.
He's like such a bad dude. But I could be wrong. You could be right that he could be like, oh, I should have been there, done my duties, blah blah blah. So yeah,
one. who cares what Christian Cole thinks? He's an asshole. And if he suffers more, that's fine. Two, yeah, it's going to weigh on Allison, but I think it was better to keep that focus on Hannah and her choice of which kid to save. I think the same thing, like you get rid of characters, you clear stuff up, keep the focus where it needs to be, because otherwise I think, yeah, I think Allison being there would have muddied that scene up a little bit. I think it would have changed feelings and motivations. You're right. I think there's a cleaner response to have out of this. Oh my God, I was doing this thing as opposed to paying attention. I mean, she could be thinking that as opposed to Cole on her responsibilities of things there. Obviously, we'll have things with Damon and them going off, but or Eamon and them, but no, I think making this choice was a much crisper, cleaner stuff. Again, just focus the scene and the story on the characters that it needs to impact there, and having them deal with the fallout of that choice already being made, I think is much better.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, so I think we come to the end of this discussion. So I want to thank everyone for joining. I think we had a few people in the chat: Imperium, Aaron, Brandon, Alex, and a few other people watching. Thanks so much, and everyone watching in the archives. Thanks so much for taking the time to check us out. And of course, big special thanks to special guests Darrin and Alyssa. Thank you so much for joining. Alyssa, if you just want to tell people where they can find you, what you're up to, that sort of thing.
Mostly I'll be here every week, but I did recently do a couple of videos. I did my season 2 predictions, so feel free to go on there and tell me how wrong I am. I am just doing this for fun. Like I literally picked the Sarah Snow thing for fun, not really expecting it to come true. It's all in fun, but please check that out. If you're into Star Trek, my other recent video is 5 ways in which I would rewrite Star Trek Discovery. So that's a Star Trek thing that you can check out. Also, please come join me. June 22nd is this coming Saturday. I'm doing a live chat where I sit here and drink a glass of wine. And Brandon and Maddie and Norman and Liz come in, and Will Ferrell #1, and then would love to have some other folks. Haven't seen Fangirling and Loving It for a little while. She's the one that came over from Darren's channel to mine. So I'd love to have her back. Just other people, special guests, come on in. We talk about Star Trek. We talk about House of Dragon. We talk about random ass shit that whatever comes to mind. So please come join me for that, and then you'll see me again, of course, here next week to talk about episode 2, season 2, which I'm looking forward to.
All right, and Darrin, what are you up to nowadays?
I'm up to hanging out with Mark and Alyssa all the time. Yeah, I'll be here, of course, most Mondays for House of the Dragon. But I'm really excited to be joining Mark in just a couple days, right back here talking about season 1 of The Expanse. Oh my God, it's like a palate cleanser. I've watched so much crap out there. I'm like, I must watch The Expanse. We did Battlestar Galactica and jumping back into Expanse, and I'm like, okay, I feel better now. I feel like I've cleansed the bad stuff off of me. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be jumping in and doing that. My life is crazy, so I haven't really been doing much on my channel lately. I've just been focusing on work, so that I still get moments to jump back here and join Mark and Alyssa and talk about some good fun shows. I'm stoked, and I'm really excited with how House of the Dragon is looking this season. It gets me really excited about the weeks ahead.
Awesome. And yeah, so if you're finding me for the first time, my name's Mark. Channel is Enchantment of Eternity, and as Darrin said, please join us Wednesday night, 9 p.m. East Coast time, to talk about season 1 of The Expanse. Came out like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, or something like that. But just rewatched it. I was like, hey, good to jump back and re-examine that. So that's going to be fun. And of course, I'll be here, and you probably with these same 2 people every Monday night, 9 p.m. East Coast time, to talk about each episode of House of the Dragon. So join us for that. And as for myself, I'm doing a lot of Star Trek reviews, reviewing Star Trek Next Generation Order, currently in season 5 of the TNG. And I also do my own very brief review of House of the Dragon as well, the night the episode airs. So yes, thank you all for joining. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next time.